All right, so today we're diving into something that might seem, I don't know, kind of basic at first glance.
Yeah.
Talking about the weather.
Yeah.
But in English. And, you might be surprised at just how much richness and like cultural nuance is actually packed into
Oh, yeah.
these everyday conversations that we have.
Absolute.
And to help us go deep on this, we're going to be taking a look at an episode of the English Talk Time podcast.
Right.
Which is such a great resource for, picking up those practical tips and phrases.
For sure. Yeah. You hit on something super crucial there. Like, especially in English speaking cultures, talking about the weather.
Yeah.
It's more than just like exchanging information, right?
Right.
It's like a little social ritual.
Yeah.
Almost.
Okay. So the podcast kicks off with some, pretty familiar phrases
Yeah.
like, what's the weather like today? Or how's the weather?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, totally. But, think of them less as just like questions about the weather and more like they're like conversational doorways.
Right. Like it's an invitation to connect, especially in like casual settings.
Oh. Okay.
It's less about like, the meteorological details and more about just like signaling that you're open to chatting, Like, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
How you doing?
I like that. Yeah. So it's almost like, it goes back to that basic human need to just find
Totally.
some kind of common ground with someone.
Like burn crap, exactly.
And what better than something we all experience?
Exactly.
Which is the weather, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The weather impacts us all.
And the podcast gives some, very simple responses to these questions too. Like
Yeah.
it's sunny and warm or it's raining.
Yeah.
You could stick with those, but
You could. But if you really want to level up your conversational game a little,
got to add some flair.
got to add some flair. Exactly.
Okay, how do we do that?
So the podcast suggests, phrases like, it's a gorgeous day, or like, this weather is dreadful.
Right.
Yeah. And you notice how they're injecting some personality and emotion
Oh, totally. Yeah.
into otherwise just like,
A fact?
a very plain fact.
It's the difference between saying it's raining and being like, oh, this weather is dreadful.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting, right?
Okay.
Because then tone of voice plays such a huge role.
Right.
Imagine saying it's a gorgeous day,
Yeah.
but just like flat, robotic delivery
Exactly.
versus like with genuine enthusiasm.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Like the meaning completely changes.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like those subtle cues we pick up on in any language, even if we don't consciously realize it.
Right. For sure.
That adds so much to the meaning.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
So, the podcast then kind of transitions, into seasons.
Okay.
Which, of course, you can't really separate them from weather discussion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got the classic four: spring, summer, autumn, winter.
Mm-hmm.
And, each one brings its own set of weather expectations.
Of course.
But also it's like they kind of have their own cultural baggage.
Baggage.
You could say that.
Interesting way to put it.
Well, just think about it. Like all of our associations with each season are shaped by like where we live.
Right.
Our traditions, like even just our individual memories, right?
It's true. Yeah.
So, the podcast hosts were kind of chatting about their favorite seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me realize, like, how subjective it is.
Yeah.
You know?
It's personal.
Totally.
Yeah. Personally, I gotta say, I'm all about autumn.
Oh, okay.
Crisp air, colorful leaves.
Yeah.
I don't know, it just feels magical.
It's cozy.
Yeah.
It's cozy. I find myself drawn to spring.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's just like this sense of renewal
Yeah.
and like possibility that I just find incredibly invigorating.
I get that, yeah.
But what I think is really fascinating is how different cultures experience and celebrate those seasons.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I bet there are some wild variations out there.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Like some cultures, they have more or fewer than 4 seasons, right?
Right.
Or some cultures base their seasons on, like agricultural cycles
Interesting.
or religious festivals.
Wow.
And it's just this reminder that like our language reflects our whole worldview.
That is such a good point. It's
Yeah.
like this whole hidden layer of
Yeah,
meaning
Totally.
we uncover
Yeah.
when we learn a new language.
Absolutely.
I love that. So, okay, to further unlock, I guess, that meaning,
Right.
we need to expand our vocabulary.
We do.
Right.
Of course.
And the podcast is a nice little, quick rundown of some of the, essential weather words.
Yes.
So we've got sunny, cloudy, windy, rainy, snowy, hot, cold, humid, stormy,
Yeah, they're like giving you the building blocks
Yes.
to construct more
Yes.
elaborate descriptive sentences
Exactly. And I love
about
that.
the weather.
But even with those basic words.
Oh, you can get creative for sure.
Right.
Like instead of just saying, it's windy, you could say, there's a gentle breeze.
Oh, I like that.
Or you could go full drama and say, the wind is howling outside.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. It's like we're painting a picture with words.
Absolutely.
So, okay. We've got our vocabulary foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Where does the podcast take us next?
Right into the heart of something that a lot of language learners find tricky.
Oh.
Small talk.
The art of casual conversation.
Exactly.
I remember really struggling with that
Oh.
when I was first learning English.
For sure.
It's a skill that takes practice.
It does. It does. But the podcast gives us, thankfully, some great starting points, right?
Okay.
So they suggest phrases like, it's a lovely day, isn't it?
Right.
Or like, it's so cold today.
Okay. So simple.
Simple.
But I can see how those would work.
Yeah. And their effectiveness, I think, lies in their open-ended nature. Right. Like, they're not just statements.
Right.
They're invitations to respond.
Right.
That little question tag at the end,
It isn't it?
The isn't it? Or just like an exclamation, so cold.
Yeah. Yeah.
It subtly signals that you're open to a back and forth.
So it's like you're tossing the conversational ball over to the other person and they can choose to hit it back.
Exactly what.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So to demonstrate, how smooth and natural this small talk can be, they even do a little role playing
They do.
in the podcast.
Yeah. They have this fun back and forth using these phrases.
So there you go. See, I told you.
Yeah.
There's way more to weather talk than meets the eye.
Absolutely.
Right? It's like this, gateway to deeper connections and cultural understanding.
It is for sure.
But we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah.
Are you ready to dive a little bit deeper?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Absolutely. Let's go deeper. One thing that really stood out to me
Yeah.
is just how this, seemingly simple topic of weather can actually be such a bridge between cultures.
Yeah. That's something that really resonated with me too.
Yeah.
One of the things the podcast wraps up with, they give some key takeaways. And one of them that stood out was they suggested to watch the weather forecast in English.
Oh, that's great.
And I know that might sound, very basic, but
it's such a good, tactic.
it is.
Because it's immersive.
Yeah.
You're picking up the vocabulary, in context. And you start to notice, all the subtle ways that weather is described in English.
Oh, total. Yeah.
Chance of showers versus heavy rain expected.
Yeah.
Those little nuances paint a different picture.
They do.
Yeah.
It's true. And it's almost like you're training your ear to
Totally.
hear those shades of meaning.
You are for sure. Yeah. So the more you expose yourself to that, authentic English, the more natural it's going to feel when you're speaking it, right?
Absolutely. And they also encourage practicing, weather talk with your friends or family, things like that.
Oh, that's a great tip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think, sometimes we overthink it.
We do.
We put too much pressure on ourselves.
Yeah,
And so finding those low pressure situations to practice is key.
for sure.
But, you mentioned earlier
Yeah.
that in some cultures, weather talk is practically an art form.
It is.
That really,
That's fascinating, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, in some cultures, weather conversations go way beyond just simple greetings.
Right.
They're deeply ingrained in the social customs.
Okay.
And they can be quite elaborate and nuanced.
Oh, wow. Do you have any, specific examples of that?
Think of the UK, right?
Okay.
Talking about the weather is
Yeah.
practically the national pastime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a way to break the ice, fill those awkward silences.
Right.
Or even just, express subtle emotions.
Oh, interesting.
It's almost like
a coded language.
a little bit, yeah.
Where you're saying one thing, but
Yeah.
also conveying this whole other layer of meaning underneath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it allows people to connect on this shared experience
Right.
while still adhering to those,
Right.
social norms of, politeness and reserve.
Right. So it's this, I'm starting to realize that this thing that I thought was just small talk
Yeah.
actually has so much more depth to
It
it
does.
than I even realized.
Absolutely.
So wow. Now before we wrap up this deep dive,
Yes.
what would you say, what are the most valuable takeaways
Ooh, that's a good question.
for for our listener here?
I think the key takeaway is that, mastering those like everyday conversations,
Yeah.
even those that are, seemingly as basic as the weather, is a huge step towards, fluency and confidence in English.
Right. So it's those building blocks that we were talking about earlier.
Your building blocks, yeah.
You start with the basics and then you gradually build up
Absolutely.
more like complex expressions.
Exactly.
Expression, interaction.
Yeah, and it's also important to remember that like it's okay to make mistakes
Oh, of course.
along the way.
Yeah.
Like, in fact, mistakes are like, that's how we learn and grow.
You learn.
You know? So embrace the journey
I love that.
and have fun with it.
Yeah. It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
And honestly, like, this deep dive has given me a whole new appreciation
Yeah.
for weather talk.
I'm so glad.
I'm going to pay so much more attention now to how people use it in different contexts.
That's great. And observe the nuances.
Yeah.
The humor, the cultural variations. It's like a microcosm of human interaction.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we say goodbye,
Yes.
do you have any like final thoughts or challenges for our listener? Just something to like,
Keep that momentum going.
keep that momentum going.
Yeah, I think, now that you have all these phrases and insights,
Yeah.
I encourage you to really pay attention to how weather is used
Okay.
in English language media, like movies,
Oh,
TV shows, podcasts,
interesting. Yeah.
even music,
Yeah.
like how do different characters use it to convey their emotions or move the plot forward,
That's a great challenge.
Yeah.
It's like turning everyday life into a language learning adventure.
Exactly. The world is your classroom.
I love that.
So keep those ears open
Yeah.
and you'll be amazed at what you discover.
Awesome. And on that note,
Yeah.
we will sign off for now,
Okay.
but keep practicing, keep exploring,
Yes.
and most importantly, have fun with English. We'll catch you on our next deep dive adventure. It's really amazing to me
Yeah.
how we can take something, as familiar as the weather and just uncover all these layers
Oh, yeah.
of meaning and cultural significance,
Absolutely.
Like, we've been speaking the secret language all along, and we didn't even realize it.
It's true. It's true. And that's the beauty of language learning, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, it opens our eyes to these whole new perspectives and ways of understanding the world around us.
It's like suddenly you have this whole new set of tools
Yeah.
to, like, decode the world.
Totally.
And speaking of tools,
Yeah.
I feel like this deep dive has given me so much to work with.
Oh.
Not just for talking about the weather,
Right.
but just for, like, approaching language learning as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so glad to hear that. And,
Yeah.
just remember, like, confidence comes with practice
Mm-hmm.
and a willingness to, like, embrace those inevitable stumbles
Right.
that we all have along the way.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes, we get so caught up in
Yeah.
trying to be perfect
We do.
that we forget to actually enjoy the process of learning.
Absolutely. Like,
Okay.
language is about connection, expression, and like sharing experiences.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about like achieving some arbitrary level of perfection.
True. So true. And this deep dive has really, brought that home for me.
I'm so glad.
It's made me realize that, even something as simple as talking about the weather
Yeah.
can be like a gateway to deeper cultural understanding and connection.
It is. It's a reminder that like language isn't just about,
Yeah.
grammar rules and vocabulary
Yeah.
lists. It's about the human experience.
Yeah.
It's about finding common ground and sharing stories and building bridges across cultures.
Beautifully put. Well,
Yeah.
on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive
Yeah.
into the fascinating world of
Yeah.
weather conversations.
It's more fascinating than we thought
Way more fascinating than I thought.
when we first started talking about
I
it.
know, right? But yeah, we hope you've enjoyed the journey
Yes,
and gleaned some, valuable insights along the way.
absolutely.
And remember, like, the world is full of opportunities
It is.
to practice and learn. So keep those ears open,
Keep them open.
embrace those conversations, and most importantly,
Have fun.
have fun exploring the richness
Yeah.
of the English language.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is. We'll catch you on our next deep dive adventure.